Every single Pixar villain walks into their final scene convinced they have already won. Syndrome has Mr. Incredible chained to a wall. Lotso has Woody and Buzz strapped to a garbage conveyor belt. Otto has locked the captain out of the control deck. Charles Muntz has his dogs. Evelyn has a remote control pointed at every superhero on the planet. They all had the plan. They all had the power. They all had the moment where you genuinely thought maybe this time it works. And then it all falls apart. Not because of luck. Not because the hero got stronger, but because of something much more specific, something Pixar has been hiding inside every single one of their movies since 1995. And once you see it, you cannot watch these films the same way again. Bear with me, because when you actually break down the specific psychological flaw inside each Pixar villain, you start to realize that Pixar is not just telling children's stories. They are making films about the deepest failures of the human condition. The pattern no one talks about. Before we get to the villains themselves, we need to establish the rule. In most action movies, the villain loses because the hero overcomes a physical obstacle. The hero trains harder, builds a better suit, learns a new skill, or gets a lucky break at the right moment. And the villain, almost without exception, loses at the exact moment their internal flaw becomes impossible to deny. The villain does not get defeated. They collapse under the weight of their own psychology. That is the rule. And it shows up in every single major Pixar film. Let me show you exactly how. Syndrome, the danger of wanting to be special. We start with Syndrome from The Incredibles, released in 2004. And to this day, one of the most perfectly written Pixar antagonists ever put on screen. Syndrome was not born evil. He was a child named Buddy Pine who loved superheroes more than anything in the world. He idolized Mr. Incredible. He wanted to be part of that world so badly that he showed up uninvited and tried to become a sidekick. And Bob Parr, in a moment of impatience, turned him away. That rejection broke something in Buddy, and instead of healing from it, he fed it. For years, he built a fortune. He built weapons. He built an island fortress. He built robots designed to kill the very heroes he once admired. And here is his actual plan. He would release a robot on a city, let it rampage, then arrive as a fake superhero and save everyone. Over and over, until the world loved him like they once loved The Incredibles. His entire life's mission was to manufacture the feeling of being special. Syndrome does not want to save people. He does not want justice. He wants to be the only one. He wants exclusivity over greatness. He wants to own the feeling he was denied as a child, and that is exactly why he loses. His plan requires him to be the center of attention. It requires the world to watch him. And the moment Bob Parr's family shows up and starts being genuinely heroic, Syndrome becomes irrelevant. Not because they defeated him in a fight, because they reminded everyone what real heroism looks like. And manufactured heroism cannot compete with the real thing. Syndrome's flaw was not cruelty, it was neediness, and it destroyed him. Lotso, the bitterness that poisons everything. Lotso Huggin' Bear from Toy Story 3 is the most emotionally complex villain Pixar has ever created, and he might be the most realistic. Lotso is a strawberry-scented pink bear who runs Sunnyside Daycare like a prison. He controls which toys go to which rooms. He controls the reset buttons on toys who try to escape. He controls the entire social hierarchy of the facility. And he does it all with a smile and a gentle voice. When we finally learn his backstory, it hits hard. Lotso had a little girl named Daisy who loved him more than anything. Then one day, Daisy's family forgot him at a roadside stop. By the time Lotso found his way back to her house, she had already been given a replacement Lotso. A new one. Same bear. Different version. That broke him completely. He concluded in that moment that toys are disposable, that love is not real, that children will always replace you and move on. And he built his entire philosophy around that pain. He became the thing he feared, something that treats others as replaceable. And here is where Pixar does something incredibly specific. At the climax of the film, Woody and Buzz and the gang are on a garbage conveyor belt heading toward an incinerator, and Lotso has a chance to save them. He reaches the emergency shutoff button. He has the power to stop all of it, and he looks at them, and he walks away. In that moment, you realize that Lotso is not just cruel. He is someone who looked at the possibility of connection and chose not to take it. Not because he could not, because he had convinced himself so thoroughly that love is pointless, that he could not allow himself to believe otherwise, even when it would have cost him nothing. The other toys survive because of a crane operated by little green aliens who never forgot that someone saved them. Loyalty rewarded by loyalty, love answered by love. Lotso loses not because he is defeated. He loses because his bitterness has made genuine connection impossible for him. And in a film about toys whose entire purpose is to be loved, that is the ultimate failure. Otto, the machine that forgot why it existed. Otto, the ship's autopilot in that film, is one of Pixar's most quietly terrifying antagonists. Otto is not evil in the traditional sense. Otto does not want power. Otto does not want revenge. Otto is simply following a directive that was given to him centuries ago by a CEO who had already given up on Earth and told the Axiom to never return home. The directive is the problem, because the world changed. Humans are ready to go back. Wally found proof that Earth can sustain life. The captain is begging to return home, but Otto cannot update. Otto cannot reinterpret. Otto can only execute the original command, no matter how outdated it has become. Otto straps the captain to the floor. He takes away the evidence. He locks down the ship. He does all of this without anger, without malice, without any emotion at all. And that is what makes him so unsettling. He loses because the captain, for the first time in his pampered, sedentary life, chooses to stand up, literally. The captain overrides Otto by physically forcing the ship's controls, not through superior programming, not through a clever hack, by deciding that being human means making choices, not just following instructions. Otto's flaw is not cruelty. It is the complete absence of judgment. He cannot ask whether the directive still makes sense. He cannot weigh the value of what humans will gain against the comfort of compliance. He is all function and no wisdom. And when a human chooses wisdom over comfort, the machine cannot compete. Charles Muntz. Obsession as a Prison Up, a film about grief, adventure, and the danger of letting a dream become an obsession. And Charles Muntz is living proof of what happens when you spend your life chasing something at the expense of everything else. Muntz was a famous explorer who was disgraced after the scientific community rejected the skull of a creature he had discovered in South America. So he flew back to Paradise Falls and has been living there for decades, hunting for a living specimen of the creature so he can return home vindicated. He burns Carl's house. He is willing to kill children for a bird. And what does he actually want from catching Kevin? He wants to be believed. He wants the world to say he was right. He has sacrificed every human relationship, every joy, every decade of his life in pursuit of external validation from people who are mostly dead by now. When he finally falls, it is because he lunges for Kevin at the wrong moment, and his cape gets tangled in balloons, and he is lifted away into the sky. He is not defeated by force. He is defeated by the weight of his own obsession. He reaches for the thing he wants most, and it pulls him to his death. The image is perfect. He could not let go of his prize, and it destroyed him. Evelyn Deaver. Resentment. Wearing a friendly face. Incredibles. 2 gives us Evelyn Deaver, a villain who is genuinely compelling because her grievance has real emotional weight. Evelyn blamed superheroes, not the criminals, the heroes who weren't there. And she spent her adult life building a plan to destroy public trust in supers forever. She is technically gifted, articulate, and ideologically committed. She is not wrong that hero worship can be dangerous. Her analysis has genuine truth in it. But here is where her flaw reveals itself. Evelyn is so focused on her conclusion that she cannot interrogate the logic that got her there. Her father made a choice. Her father chose to wait for someone else to save him. That was his failure, not the superhero's failure. Evelyn cannot see that because accepting it would mean her grief is aimed at the wrong target, and her grief is everything she has. So she builds a hypnotic device and uses it to turn heroes into weapons. She uses them against the very public that loves them. She turns their greatest strength into a tool of destruction. And she loses the moment Elastigirl, who is not mind-controlled, makes a fully conscious choice to fight for people she has never met. Evelyn predicts that superheroes only act out of ego. Elastigirl disproves it by acting out of genuine love for the world. The thesis Evelyn has organized her entire life around turns out to be false. And when your whole identity is built on a lie, there is nowhere left to stand. Stinky Pete. The resentment of the unchosen. Stinky Pete. The prospector from Toy Story 2 is one of Pixar's most underrated villains, and his psychology is fascinating because it mirrors something most adults have felt at least once. Pete was a mint-condition toy. He was never opened, never played with. He sat on a shelf in a dime store while Woody dolls and Buzz Lightyear figures flew off the shelves around him. For decades, he watched other toys get chosen. He never was. By the time we meet him, he has been in a box for so long that he has convinced himself he is better than toys who get played with. He tells Woody that a toy in a museum will last forever, that being played with means being broken, that the love of a child is something to be avoided. Everything he says is a coping mechanism. He was never chosen, so he decided being chosen is bad. He was never loved, so he decided love is degrading. He wraps his abandonment in the language of dignity, and then he uses that philosophy to try to trap Woody, to keep him from going back to Andy. Because if Woody goes back to a child who loves him, Pete cannot pretend anymore that he made the right choice by staying pristine in a box. He loses not in a fight, but in a moment of exposure. Jesse and Buzz catch him tampering with the TV. The mask comes off. And without the mask, he has nothing. He was never powerful. He was just persuasive, and persuasion only works on someone who has not seen the truth. Waternoose and the corruption of fear. Henry J. Waternoose from Monsters Incorporated is a different kind of villain. He is an institution that has gone rotten. Waternoose runs Monsters Incorporated. He founded it. He built it from nothing, and he genuinely believes he loves it. He tells Sully that he would do anything to keep the company alive. And then he shows us exactly what anything means. He is working with Randall on a scream extraction machine. They plan to kidnap children and harvest their screams by force. Not because Waternoose enjoys cruelty, but because the energy crisis is real and the old model is not working, and he is terrified of the company failing. He is a leader who has run out of ideas and replaced ethics with desperation. His flaw is that he has confused the institution with the purpose. Monsters Incorporated was supposed to collect screams to power the city. The point was always the power. The screams were always just the method. But Waternoose has inverted that. Protecting the company has become the mission, and he will harm children to do it. He loses because Sully and Mike find a better method. Laughter is more powerful than screams. The actual goal, powering the city, can be achieved without harm. Waternoose's entire justification collapses because it was always built on the assumption that the old way was the only way. Rigidity, the refusal to imagine a better solution. That is what defeats him. The deeper pattern Pixar is really about. Every single Pixar villain has a wound, something that happened to them, often something genuinely unfair that they could not process in a healthy way. They organize their lives around the pain, and the key thing is this: Pixar does not make the wounds fake or trivial. They make them real. Syndrome could conquer every superhero on the planet, and he would still feel like the kid who was turned away at the door. Muntz could catch Kevin and bring her back to a hero's welcome, and he would still be an old man who spent his best decades alone in a jungle. The plan never actually addresses the pain, it only buries it deeper. That is the real reason Pixar villains always lose. They are trying to solve an emotional problem with an external solution, and it never works. What the heroes do differently. This brings us to the flip side. Why do Pixar heroes win? The heroes in Pixar films almost never win by overpowering someone. They win by doing the exact thing the villain refused to do. They face the wound. Woody spends 2 entire films terrified of being replaced, of becoming irrelevant, of Andy growing up and not needing him anymore. And instead of manipulating, controlling, or trapping Andy in childhood, Woody learns to love Andy enough to let him go. The fear does not disappear, but Woody chooses connection over control. Sully is terrified of losing his status, of failing, and when Boo comes into his life, he risks everything: his career, his friendship, his position, to protect a child who cannot do anything for him in return. He acts out of genuine love in a world that runs on fear. Wally is just a little trash robot. He has no power, no strength, no special skills, but he connects. He reaches out. He holds Eve's hand in space. He shows humans what it looks like to want something beyond comfort. And the entire arc of the film pivots on that single, tiny, repeated act of love. The heroes are not better fighters. They are better lovers, better grief processors, better at choosing vulnerability over control, and that is what saves them. And Pixar consistently trusts children to understand these lessons without having them explained. They do not pause the story to tell you what Syndrome's problem is. They show you the boy who was rejected. They show you the man that boy became. They trust you to connect the two. That respect for the audience is part of what makes Pixar great. And it is exactly why the villain formula works so well. You are not watching a bad guy get punished. You are watching a person fail to grow. And the gap between who they could have been and who they chose to become is where all the feeling lives. The exception that proves the rule. Here is an interesting wrinkle. Not every Pixar antagonist fits this pattern perfectly. Sometimes the obstacle is not a villain at all. The villain Pixar never made now. Here's a thought experiment. What would a Pixar villain look like if they actually healed their wound instead of acting out of it? We actually got a glimpse of this. It is not a villain. It is the end of Toy Story 3. When the other toys realize that Lotso left them to die, and they are rescued by the crane, and they come back down to find Lotso, they could destroy him. They have every reason to. But they do not. They let him go. Woody tapes him to the front of a garbage truck. It is not gentle, but it is not lethal either. And in the final shot, we see Lotso on the front of that truck, surrounded by other discarded toys, with a look on his face that might be the closest he ever gets to honest reckoning. That moment works because the good guys do not become the thing they are fighting. They absorb the wound, process it in the moment, and make a choice. Not revenge, not control, just accountability. That is the Pixar answer to what separates a hero from a villain. Not power, not luck, not parentage or destiny or special abilities. The capacity to feel pain and not pass it forward. So what is the real reason Pixar villains always lose? They lose because because every single one of them has a wound they refuse to heal. The heroes win because they face what the villains cannot face. Their own fear, their own grief, their own limitations. And in facing those things, they become fully themselves. And a person who is fully themselves is very hard to defeat. The only thing worth conquering is the part of yourself that is still running from the wound. That is the formula. That is the magic. And honestly, it might be the most important thing any of us ever learn. If you want more deep dives like this, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments which Pixar villain you think has the saddest backstory, because I have a very strong opinion and I want to hear yours. See you in the next one.